Right, I'm just going to show the engine before I do any more. I know Ian at Avon Bar redid the engine, but it's not, the painting on it's not really what I was looking for. He's a good engine builder, not painter. So I'm just going to show you. Just incoming. So it had a whole new sump which has been sprayed, and that seems to be fine. This has been painted, but it's not really as good as I want it to be. So, and I think he's sprayed over all of this, but there's no prep work been done to it and so on. So yeah, it's I'm just going to rub it all back, and I'm going to spray all the silver bits with Hammerite Smooth Silver, and then Lucy is going to paint the engine red. I know you don't see any of that, but you know, just I want it better, so yeah. And there she is there. Right, I've cleaned up the engine. I'll just show you that before I start painting it, and I've cleaned up some other bits. So I was just going to give it a bit of a key, but I went a little bit too far. Gone back to bare metal. So I'm going to spray all of this in silver. Obviously paint all that in red. Again, paint that silver, and then obviously that in red. Taking a load of parts off the engine, just so I can get them all sprayed up. They were okay, but again, not good enough. So yeah, got all them to spray, and the turbo and stuff, I put it through the sandblaster or sandblast cabinet, and it's come up all right, which is good. So yeah, I'm going to get on and spray.
Hey mini enthusiasts, how are you doing? Welcome back. This is part 29 of the Project ERA build, and maybe like me, when I heard Mark say he'd put the turbo through the sound blaster, my jaw hit the floor. I did message him quickly to say, hopefully you did make sure you covered up all the holes. He did, trust me. I discussed this with him previously, where he'd done the same with the carburettor, so yeah, he did make sure everything was covered really well. There was no chance of getting sand within the turbo or anything like that. It's just one of those things where if you heard someone mention it on a forum or something like that, you'd probably advise them against doing it. So, like I say, thanks for joining back this week. I'm going to continue for the time being with the picture-in-picture bit. Had quite a bit of feedback on that, so thank you very much. There were a couple of people that didn't like it, and a couple of suggestions for improvement. So one of those is hopefully I appear a little bit smaller now, and the other concern was that I would be sort of covering up some detail that's going on in the video. But as you know, with most of these ERA videos, they're filmed in sort of widescreen at a distance, so there's bits of the video where they're just dead areas. So I'll always try and position myself out the way. So like in this video at the moment, we've got Lucy working on the ERA engine in the bottom right hand corner, so I will probably position myself top left or something like that. So and the other thing I just wanted to mention before we get into this video too far was the last ERA update I uploaded. There was a bit of an error in the narration. It was more the information I gave might have been a little bit misleading. It was certainly, on reflection, could be read or interpreted as being incorrect. In fact, some of it was incorrect, so I thought I've edited that video and taken it out just because I don't want to mislead anyone and give them incorrect information. It was actually mentioned by a viewer on the video, so I appreciate the feedback. I'd mentioned in it that the brakes were, or I'd given the impression that the brakes were a performance upgrade, which in theory they're not, because the pistons are in the CAD calipers are the same size as the standard calipers. They're 4 pistons like they are in the standard calipers, and they're applying the brake force on the same size brake pad. So when you're applying the same amount of brake fluid at the same pressure to the same pistons, same size pistons and the same size pads, there isn't actually a performance upgrade. But there are upgrades in other areas as well. The CAD calipers are much lighter, they're engineered to much finer tolerances, and obviously you get a big improvement in unsprung weight on the front of the car, which helps handling. So yeah, I appreciate the feedback, and that is why, if you go back and watch that video, it's been slightly edited.
Right, I've painted the engine, which I'll show you in a minute. I've just got all these parts to clean up in the sandblast cabinet. So I've got the boot light thing, I don't know what it's called, boot lamp holder, the door mirrors, door handles and boot lock, which are all Nimbus grey in a matte finish, which I've got. I've got spruce up the rocker cover and the seat rails, turbo or the front badge, and I think that was it for cleaning stuff up. So yeah, I'll just show you the engine. So that is looking 100 times better. I've got 3 coats on the red. Last coat was quite a nice thick coat. So it's very glossy and smooth, which is good. And I managed to get 4 coats on all the silver. Did the oil filter housing in silver. I also cleaned up, I'll show you the back of the engine. That's all looking 100 times better as well. Then I also cleaned up the carb and manifold. I did put it in the blast cabinet just to give it a clean up. I did make sure there was no holes in it, so there's no sand got in it and so on. So that is looking much better. Bring that into the sunlight. Much cleaner. And then I also cleaned up this in the blast cabinet as well. It was so this was just had oil on it and stuff. I haven't sprayed any of this, I'm not going to. And then this was all rusty and this had black stuff all over it. And I know you don't see any of it, you'll never see any of it, but it, peace of mind, it's all nice and clean. So yeah, so that's that. And yeah, so I've got the mirrors were painted in black for some reason, so they need to be in Nimbus grey. Same with the boot handle lock. For some reason that was sprayed in black as well, so I need to take that apart. The handles that came off the ERA were the right colour, and so were these, but one of the handles broke there, so I had to get a new pair. So I'm going to effectively sandblast these, spray them, and then take all the locks out of the old handles, reuse them. So rocker cover just needs a good polish up. I'm gonna see how that comes up, and then seat rails just need to do them. So I'm gonna just take the bits apart there.
So some of these Nimbus grey parts that they fitted on the ERAs are hard to come by now. They were fitted on Mini Cities of that era, and I was having a conversation with Mark actually about the roof gutter trim and how difficult it was to get a roof gutter trim. I was in the workshop and I turned around and looked at Sprout, and Sprout has a Nimbus grey roof gutter trim. So yeah, I don't know whether that was standard or not. I'm assuming it was. So, but they are difficult to get hold of now.
Right, just going to show you all the bits I've sprayed today. Come out really well actually. So I put all these in the blast cabinet, took them back to bare plastic, sprayed a adhesion coat on them for plastic, then primered, and 4 coats of 1K Nimbus grey matte. So that's 2 mirrors, the door handles. I know I'm going to change all the running gear over from the old handles, so those buttons should be chrome, and I've obviously taped them up. That's the boot. That's the rear number plate light holder, goes on the boot. You see that boot lock, obviously bonnet, badge. I just need to get the sticker. Let's get some of them for the inner wing, because there's none on there for the wiring harness. And I've decided I didn't like the polished chrome for the rocker cover, so I'm going red. Anoraks hate me, but if I ever sell the car, they can get a polished one, or get that one polished back up. So yeah, it's all come out good. Next job is to get the engine all put together. I've got everything I think I need here now. The engine hoist is here as well, so I think once I've done that, I'm going to get the engine in, which means I can get the hubs on, brake disc, calipers, drive shafts, then they ain't got to come off again. So yeah, I'll see you in a bit. Alright, good afternoon. Alright, next job is oil cooler, which I need to adapt. I need to take that sensor off of that and weld it onto that, and then the water cooler secondary, I need to take those tabs off and that tab off there and weld them onto there, and then get some parts sprayed up. Right, I've had to order some brazing, alloy brazing rods for the oil cooler and water cooler, so I've had to scrap that for now. So today I'm going to get on with putting the bits on the engine and hopefully getting the engine in. Once the engine's in, I can get the hubs and that on, drive shafts in, then I ain't got to take them off again. So yeah, here we go.
So quite an exciting part of the build. By the end of today's video, Mark will have the engine back in the body, so quite a milestone. As Mark's rebuilding the engine here, I thought I'd just go over some specifications of the standard ERA engine and where this differs, because it has been modified by Ian at Avonbar, so it has some modifications over standard. So originally the engine in the ERA turbo was taken from the Metro turbo. So it was originally a 1275cc A plus engine. It's now been bored, so it's 1310cc with Amiga cast 10cc pistons. The 10cc dish in the pistons lowers the compression ratio, so you can increase the amount of boost. It has an Avon-Bar phase 1 camshaft and a phase 4 cylinder head with 26cc chambers. It has an ultralight steel flywheel and clutch assembly, and all the bottom end con rods etc. have all been lightened and balanced. The gearbox side has all been upgraded as well, and it has a cross-pin Evo differential in it now. The carburettor has been uprated, so it's a modified HIF 44 carburettor, and the carburettor on a turbo, the A series, is modified over standard as well because it's sealed, because it runs with pressure inside the carburettor. It needs extra seals in there to basically stop it blowing boost pressure and fuel out of the carburettor, because the carburettor is usually operated under vacuum in a naturally aspirated engine. The normal ERA turbo runs about 7.5 psi of boost at 6,000 RPM, and that boost is controlled by an ECU. The boost comes from a Garrett T3 turbo, which is actually quite a big turbo for the size of the engine, so you get a bit of turbo lag on the ERA, but Ian upgraded the engine with a high boost actuator, so rather than running 7.5 psi now, controlled by the ECU, it will run a fixed 10 psi of boost, which makes quite a bit of difference. When ERA developed the ERA, they developed it with 140 brake horsepower on the engine, so all the chassis, suspension and steering was geared up to handle that amount of power. Now that's not uncommon in engineering terms. You over-engineer something by a margin of say 40% is probably about right. So the ERA itself, the chassis and suspension and braking system, are engineered to handle more power than it was produced for, but obviously they wouldn't run it at that brake horsepower all the time because they had to make the car reliable, and it had to be sold through Rover dealerships and last the warranty period. So I'm sure if they all run 140 brake horsepower, they wouldn't have lasted very long. So it's looking absolutely amazing there. As mentioned, Mark shot blasted the turbo, but the exhaust manifold and turbo elbow have been ceramic coated as well, which helps with the heat dissipation, because the turbo will get to the point where it glows red hot. So the ceramic coating helps with the heat, and the downpipe's been ceramic coated as well. I didn't mention the distributor. The distributor's upgraded as well from standard. I can't remember the spec off the top of my head. And you'll see on Mark's ERA it's got a braided oil feed supply to the turbo. The original pipe would have been a metal steel solid pipe, but they were prone to cracking and leaking and that sort of thing, so braided is an upgrade. Performance-wise on the ERA, it had a 0 to 60 time of 7.8 seconds was their claimed 0 to 60 time, which by today's supercar standards is nothing really, and most hot hatches will comfortably do that. But back in the day, in the early 90s, the sort of equivalent cars on the road to remember were the Renault 5 Turbo, Peugeot 205 GTI was extremely popular, Volkswagen Golf GTI, which is still a popular car today, the Ford Fiesta XR2 and the Citroen AX GT as well. And head for head, the ERA competed with all of those cars pretty well, was faster, on paper than the Golf GTI, the Ford Fiesta XR2 and the Citroen AX GT, so it could certainly hold its own in the ERA, although price wise it was very expensive for a Mini. So again, Lucy hands on here, helping Mark put the engine back in. Quite a delicate job. It's made more tricky just because the turbo hanging off the back of the engine is added weight, and you've got to try and get it in almost tucked underneath that bulkhead where it's cut out of the back there. But as I'm sure as you'll see, as more ancillaries get put on, it's more and more difficult to access parts on the car. So we're drawing the net to an end for this week's update. Thanks for tuning in again, and we'll be back with another era update probably in a couple of days' time.